For hours, Kachi slept like one who had never slept before and was awoken by a huge splash of water. Her husband Obidike poured her a bucket of water as she slept as Kachi ran out of their room in shock. To her surprise, she met a group of her husband's friends in their hut, and Kachi was extremely ashamed as they all laughed at her and mimicked the snorting sound she made as she snored. Once upon a time, there lived a very beautiful girl named Kachi. Kachi was the only daughter of a popular businessman in the village. She was so beautiful and kind, and her parents loved her with all of their heart. They hoped to find her a husband who would love and cherish their daughter as much as they did. So Kachi's father ensured that Kachi wore the best dresses and shoes in the village. Her mother braided her hair so beautifully, and this made Kachi to stand out from other girls in the village as her beauty radiated wherever she went. All the young men in the village admired Kachi and wanted to marry her. However, Kachi's father was not ready to give his daughter out in marriage to just any man. To ensure that his daughter was well taken care of, Kachi's father drew up a comprehensive list of the items that any young man who was willing to marry his daughter had to provide as part of her bride price. Amongst the items on the list were 5 big cows, 10 goats, 100 tubers of yams, and a big box of expensive fabrics, amongst other things. Kachi's father not only wanted his daughter to be comfortable in her marriage, he also wanted to ensure that any man who was coming forward to marry Kachi truly loved her and was willing to go any length to have her. To ensure this, Kachi's father stated that such a man must endure 100 strokes of the cane to show how much he really loved Kachi. Kachi's father believed that doing this would chase unserious men away, as he couldn't risk his daughter getting married to just any man. Several men came for Kachi's hand in marriage, but were unable to either afford the items on Kachi's bride price list or were unable to stand the 100 lashes. For years, Kachi remained single as no man came for her hand in marriage. All the other girls of her age grade were getting married, and this troubled Kachi, who pleaded with her father to be more lenient with his requirements. But Kachi's father was adamant because he was convinced that his conditions would attract the right man for his precious daughter. One day, a young farmer in the village named Chinedu caught sight of Kachi when she was heading to her father's farm. Chinedu was struck by Kachi's beauty and gentleness and decided within himself to spend the rest of his life with her. He approached Kachi's father and declared his intentions to marry his daughter. Her father laughed heartily and presented Chinedu with the marriage list. Chinedu's heart sank as he looked over the items he could not afford. As Chinedu still had his eyes fixated on the list, Kachi's father informed him of the final test, which was the 100 strokes of the cane, which he had to endure if he really wanted to marry his daughter Kachi. "Are you certain that you want to proceed with this?" Kachi's father asked Chinedu, who nodded and replied, saying that he was willing to endure anything for Kachi's sake. And so, the entire village gathered to witness this unusual act of love. With each stroke, Chinedu's back ripped and his strength waned, but his spirit did not falter. Kachi, laying in her room, wept for the pain her suitor bore. By the time the lashes were complete, Chinedu knelt on the ground weak but victorious. Chinedu was the only man who endured to the end, as all of Kachi's other suitors either gave up on hearing about the 100 strokes or barely made it past 50 strokes of the cane. On seeing Chinedu's dedication, Kachi approached her father, pleading that the exorbitant list be scrapped, but her father was hell-bent on ensuring that Chinedu had the financial capacity to look after his daughter. He told Chinedu that Kachi would only be his wife if he provided the full items on his list, and Chinedu, still wincing in pain, returned home lost in his own thoughts. He was only a poor farmer who had nothing except his little farm, where he grew some crops which he sold at the local market. Chinedu pondered on how he would be able to afford the items on the list as he decided to double his work, hoping to provide the items in bits. However, one morning, whilst Chinedu was in his farm working tirelessly, his friend Obum ran up to him to inform him that Kachi was getting married. A young rich man named Obidike approached Kachi's father to perform the traditional rites for Kachi and also endured the 100 lashes. Chinedu, heartbroken and confused, approached Kachi's father to plead for a chance, but it was already too late. The wine had been poured and the kola nuts broken as Kachi became Obidike's wife. Obidike, unlike Chinedu, had not come for love. He had come for the pride of winning the most beautiful girl in the village. He provided everything that were required on the list as his barns overflowed with yams and his herds were plentiful. However, despite being extremely wealthy, Obidike lacked the warmth of Chinedu's heart. Kachi, bound by tradition and her father's will, became Obidike's wife. The first few weeks were filled with feast and merriment, but soon the celebrations faded and reality settled like dust in the corners of their home. One night, as Obidike lay awake, he heard a sound that grated on his nerves. Kachi, his beautiful bride, snored so loudly. It wasn't a quiet murmur, but a loud, unpleasant noise that filled the room and kept Obidike awake. Obidike was not pleased, as he was disappointed to go through all that pain for a woman he considered to be imperfect. He mocked Kachi with cruel words that cut deeper than the lashes on his back. "Is this the beauty I married? A snoring beast?" His words echoed through the compound, and Kachi's heart, once full of hope, was now filled with regret. Her husband's cruel words turned their home to a place of silent suffering, and Kachi began to dread the night as she stopped sleeping at night. Kachi would sit by the fire until her eyes burned, fighting sleep, doing anything to avoid her husband's wrath, and as time went on, her smiles began to fade. Kachi lived a life of misery in her own home, as Obidike spared no opportunity to call her a grunting pig. Every night, whilst Obidike slept, Kachi sat in a corner as she forced herself to stay awake. Her husband Obidike cared less that his wife was not catching any sleep at night, as long as he was not hearing her loud snores. Kachi lived like a stranger in her own home, as her husband paid no attention to her and showed her so much hatred. One morning, when Obidike was away, Kachi fell asleep in her hut as she had not had a decent sleep in weeks. She was up all night and her joints and body ached from exhaustion. For hours, Kachi slept like one who had never slept before and was awoken by a huge splash of water. Her husband Obidike poured her a bucket of water as she slept, as Kachi ran out of their room in shock. To her surprise, she met a group of her husband's friends in their hut, and Kachi was extremely ashamed as they all laughed at her and mimicked the snorting sound she made as she snored. Obidike joined his friends as they all laughed at Kachi, who felt so humiliated as she ran out of her hut in shame. Kachi returned to her father's house, filled with pain and regret for ever marrying Obidike. She blamed her father for the misery she now endured because his strict conditions had bound her to a man who was so wealthy but unkind. Kachi's father regretted his actions because his plan did not guarantee his daughter true love, but put her in the hands of a very wicked man who never loved her in the first instance. However, he could not do anything about it because Obidike had paid his daughter's bride price in full. Kachi wept for hours and decided to return home to her husband, who was extremely angry at her for leaving him hungry for hours. Obidike yelled at Kachi at the top of his voice, commanding her to go prepare him a meal to eat. Kachi, feeling sad and dejected, rushed off to the kitchen to prepare some food for her angry husband, who later ate the food and went to sleep. Whilst Obidike slept, Kachi remained awake as she thought about the miserable life she was living with her husband, who had turned her beautiful life into a terrible nightmare. When morning came, Obidike left his hut to his usual gambling spot, where he gambled with his friends. He returned home late that evening and informed Kachi that she was leaving his house the next day, and Kachi was so confused as she wondered what she had done wrong for Obidike to send her away. Obidike informed Kachi that he lost her in a bet and that she had to leave in the morning with the man who won his bet. And Kachi busted out in tears as she could not believe that her husband hated her to the extent of doing such a terrible thing to her. What had happened was that Obidike heard of a rich man in the village who had challenged him to a game, and Obidike, being the proud man that he was, accepted the rich man's invite as he hated to be challenged and ridiculed. Obidike, convinced of his abilities, told the rich man that if he ever loses the game, he would give him anything that he ever asked for. The rich man smiled as they commenced the game, but after a few hours, Obidike realized that the rich man had won the game. Obidike, furious and disappointed, asked the rich man what he wanted, and the rich man requested for Obidike's wife, Kachi. Obidike was filled with shock as he never expected the rich man to request for his wife. However, a part of him was excited to let go of Kachi as he never loved her in the first place. When morning came, Kachi heard a knock on their door and rushed to check who it was, and to her greatest surprise, she saw Chinedu standing at her door. "What are you doing here?" Kachi asked Chinedu, who revealed that he had come to take her away from her wicked husband. Chinedu was the rich man who won the bet against Obidike. What had happened was that after Chinedu lost Kachi to Obidike, he was heartbroken to see how badly Obidike treated the woman he loved. Chinedu stood in a distance and watched as Kachi became a shadow of herself. Unable to endure the pain he felt, he moved out of the village, determined to bring himself out of poverty. Chinedu traveled to a faraway village where he worked tirelessly on a very big cocoa farm. Over time, his dedication and selflessness caught the eye of the farm owner, who was a wealthy man who had no hair. The owner took a liking to Chinedu, who he handed his entire business to before his demise. With his newfound wealth, Chinedu expanded the business and became one of the most prosperous men in the region. Despite his success, Chinedu's heart remained with Kachi. He yearned to rescue her from the life of misery she had been subjected to. Unsure of what to do, he decided to return back to the village and overheard Obidike bragging at his gambling spot. Obidike promised that if anyone could beat him in a game, he would give the person anything that they ever wanted. When Chinedu heard Obidike boasting at the gambling spot, he knew his chance had come. "Come with me, Kachi," Chinedu said, his voice steady but his hands trembling. "I promise on my life, you will never shed another tear of sorrow in your life." Kachi, still filled with shock, replied him saying, "But how can I trust another man?" she asked as she wept, and Chinedu swore to protect and love her with every beat of his heart. Together, they left the village, leaving behind everything that brought Kachi pain. As the days went by, Kachi healed as her smiles finally returned. Chinedu loved her with everything he had, and Kachi was so grateful to life for giving her a second chance at love. And so, Kachi and Chinedu lived a life rich in happiness and love. a testament to the belief that good things come to those who wait and great things come to those who do not give up on love. Her ex-husband Obidike ended up marrying another woman who made his life a living hell. He regretted ever sending Kachi away with another man and wished he could turn back the hands of time. The lessons to be learned from this story is that true love always finds its way. We should try not to interfere with the lives of others based on our own personal perspective of life. Love, as we all know, has no formula, as what works for one might not necessarily work for another. Treat everyone the way you would like to be treated, and we will all live in a peaceful world. I hope you enjoyed the story. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.